Jesus quite literally found another way. He knew that the Jewish tradition and Roman law were not working, were working for some people, and those people, it was really wonderful. But it was not working for other people. Those communities felt defeated and overwhelmed and marginalized. So he created environments that leaned into shared wisdom and everyday life experiences. So let's consider this verse from John 15, which was not read this morning. But it is, I am the vine and you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. So Jesus gives this metaphor to help understand what to focus on. And it all comes down to one word: connection. Jesus says he is the vine and we are the branches. And as long as we stay connected, we will bear much fruit. Jesus knew there was always another way to be connected, another way to create hospitable space, another way to understand religious life, especially if there's a break in connection. But do we even know what it means to be a part of religious life? Some of us are even allergic to the word religious, saying, I'm spiritual but not religious. I even skirt around the idea of being religious. It's such a formal word and reeks rigidity. So check this out. The Latin root of the word religion is legar, I think that's how you say it, meaning, this is the important part, meaning profound, inescapable mutuality of life that is deep within and between us. Here we are being religious people. I can get behind that. And we are engaging each other in mutuality. Today we will focus on creating a space of mutuality, a hospitable space in Jesus' way, otherwise known as another way. My family has a long-standing tradition in the hospitality industry, including restaurants and food services and hotels and even event planning. It's like a little out of control, I'm not gonna lie. I could have easily continued on this path in DC, following in the footsteps of my family. I inherited those same gifts. In this line of work, the customer is often always right, and success is measured by quantitative data and the amount earned in a day or week. This is how we earned a living. However, beyond the surface, we all found deeper value in the practice of hospitality, particularly in creating welcoming spaces. My mother and grandmother would go seriously overboard. I mean, not just in their work, but also at home, in the meticulous arrangements of place settings and centerpieces and cutlery on the tables. And my father, he embodied the joy of cooking and being in the kitchen. And even during challenging times, such as when there were too many customers, not enough time, or when everyone was exhausted and overwhelmed, we worked together to accomplish each task. Whether it was handling a lunch rush or hosting a party, celebrating a holiday, or managing a major event from start to finish. Hospitality oozed into all of the cracks of our lives. It was exhilarating to create spaces where strangers, and sometimes familiar faces gathered to share a meal, celebrate a major event, or simply take a vacation. Our job was to make these experiences feel good, nourishing, and like home. We aimed to create spaces that allowed the mind and the body and the heart to rest and engage deeply in conversation and learning. Despite my love for creating spaces with my hands, I discovered that I cherished the conversations I had with people even more. It was the stories I heard and shared with others that made the experience valuable for me. And I realized that I didn't have to confine this type of work to a restaurant. So I pursued my passion in the setting of the church. To me, hospitality means not only creating space, but also generously sharing in that space. It involves cultivating an environment where generosity can thrive, although sharing oneself isn't always easy. Hospitality requires us to practice authentic and vulnerable sharing. I often, when I was in my Papa's restaurant, got caught up in engaging conversations with strangers at tables, prompting my Papa with sweat on his brow to call from the kitchen, "Marta, come on!" so that I could serve the next hot meal to the table. I know you can imagine that. Hospitable space can be defined as a space into which we welcome others to find head, heart, and body knowing. To slow down the norms of efficiency and to enter into new ways of creating a future that calls forth collective wisdom. But this practice requires trust. This practice requires an openness to diversity. That's what makes hospitality so radical. That's why it takes such a generous heart. So I want to take a minute to practice creating a hospitable space. This is an invitation to share with yourself and the community. And so I'm going to invite us to take another deep breath. I invite you to feel your feet on the floor. And your hands can be on your lap if that's comfortable. If you need grounding, I invite you to place your hands down. But if you need energy, I invite you to put your hands up like this. And with your eyes open or closed, I invite you to quiet your minds and just listen. Listen to your heart. Listen to God's voice. Listen to the quiet room, the movement, the sound system, the rustling of bodies. Now I want you to turn to those people around you. I don't know, 2 or 3, 4. 4 might be good. And I want you to tell them a micro story that is relevant to today. Tell the story without judgment of yourself or your neighbor. Simply share a story, be generous with your story, and then listen without judgment. Take it in. Welcome wonder, witness the stories of others. Perhaps this is a practice of another way. I'll tell you my micro story before I turn it over to you. I went to Massachusetts last week for a few days to play with my best friend. I did, we totally played. And when I saw the pictures that were taken of me, I was shocked to see how happy I looked and how bright. I was so happy. Now it's your turn. Turn to each other for a few minutes. I invite you to continue these stories during fellowship hour as you return to the larger congregation. As you return to the larger congregation, continue to keep an open heart. I love Plymouth so much! As you return to the larger congregation, I continue to keep that open heart, a listening ear, and a slow breath. One of the pieces of my recent academic work was exploring African American practices in religious settings. And I wondered what elements of worship look different than ours. And I wondered what the process was for creating hospitable spaces in those communities. And one of the concepts that describes this communal sensibility in African American culture is the word Ubuntu. The NTU, meaning living force of spirit, and BUNTU, meaning grace. Ubuntu is the core of being a person and the fact that we cannot be fully formed as human beings in isolation. See, we're getting back to connection, right? Ubuntu promotes abundance and what it means to be interconnected. Our role in this place as religious people, in the spirit of Ubuntu, is to create spaces of connection and collective wisdom. This way of gathering moves us away from the conventional expert methods, say a keynote speaker, or a CEO, or a clergy. It invites each of us to give up power and privilege and build new ways and structures that are bent towards justice. So in these communities, we don't name the smartest person in the room because the room itself, the gathered whole, is the smartest. Each of us in my family lived in the way of Ubuntu. My mother's focus on hospitality is often how the theme gets threaded through the dinner party. My papa's focus on hosting the lunch shift was on how many people could get fed in 2 hours. And my aunt's focus is on the creativity of place settings and centerpieces. And not surprisingly, my focus became on how people could connect and gossip and tell jokes and banter about politics and religion and all of life. For me, the real juiciness came from the rich conversations shared between people. It was always about setting a table for all to slow down and turn to the story. Running a restaurant or hotel was not going to be my thing. For me, there was always another way. This morning we heard from the story of loaves and fishes. This famous account is when Jesus miraculously feeds 5,000 with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Impossible, right? Or maybe this miraculous moment was not about getting fed, It was not about the centerpieces or the efficiency of an event. Perhaps Jesus is trying to teach us another way. John the Baptist had just died a brutal death. It was tragic and scary. The anxiety and fear were traveling throughout the community. People felt isolated in their homes. There was a disconnection and emotions were high. Some were probably numb, while others were awash with emotion. It was hard. Some thought it unbelievable, while others turned their eye. It was simply too much to take in. But Jesus said, there is another way. He gathered the community on the hill and created a hospitable space. He created radical hospitality by believing that in connection with each other, they would share the wisdom of their lives. It was never about the miraculous transformation of the loaves and fishes, but rather a miraculous transformation of the community to show up. Slow down and turn to story. I have another story. Some of you may already know that my son is enrolled in a barber program here in Fort Collins. He started the program in February of 2024 after a difficult time in Colorado Springs. He came to be with us, needing some space and time away from the pressures of our culture. It was important for him to find a new path for his life and escape from a toxic personal narrative that was holding him back. One day, I noticed an old building on the southeast side of College Avenue with a sign that read, Barber School, located about a half a mile from Prospect. This sparked my interest, and I knew it could be the change my son needed. What you need to understand about my son is that, like the rest of our family, he challenges the dominant Western worldview and prefers a more creative and imaginative approach to life. He has a strong affinity for words and stories and a deep love for reading. When he was little, his first word, I'm not kidding, was a complete sentence. And by the age of 5, he had listened to all the Harry Potter books on audio. Given his struggle, I knew he needed a place to slow down, to quiet his mind, and explore an alternative way of life. The barber program seemed to be the perfect refuge for him to find peace. It is sometimes easier to share certain things with strangers rather than those we know well. And barbers and even bartenders often become the confidants to their regular customers, knowing intimate details about their lives. In some ways, it feels like my son is following in his parents' footsteps. The barber school, though, is a beautiful place owned by a local Mexican family who also runs 4 barber shops in northern Colorado. When my son went in to inquire about the program, he immediately felt at home and was welcomed with open arms. The school is loud, spirited, and a communal space that creates this alternative group of people doing this really cool stuff with their hands. The space has nurtured my son's sense of self and alleviated his anxiety. It allowed him to remember who he was and what he was about. This experience reminds us of the spirit of Jesus' other way, providing a hospitable space for personal growth and a sense of authentic and vulnerable community. This has been a welcoming and liberating environment for both my son and others in similar situations. In our church, we aim to embody this same spirit of hospitality, mutual support, and collective wisdom, no matter the circumstances. Our model is the way that Jesus gathered the community after the tragedy of John the Baptist. And my orientation to hospitality and my family origin helped me to discover that there is another way. And my son, he found another way too. Another way invites us to sit, take a breath, and share stories and connect, guided by a spirit of hospitality and our collective wisdom, both within our community and beyond, so that it will allow our purpose, it will allow our purpose to emerge out of your collective wisdom, out of your collective sharing. That is how we will know who we are going to be. Amen.